Hey y'all, here's a few of the things I'll be doing today. Some free chairs that I got, a $3 TV tray from Goodwill, a $2 cutting board from a local thrift store, and a $4 1980s wall hanging from Goodwill. I also got this bowl from a local thrift store for $2. So without further ado, let's get started. TV trays are some of my favorite things to redo, and they're getting harder and harder for me to find, but I do sell them quite often in my booth. They usually don't even last 24 hours. So with every piece, the first thing I'm going to do is clean it. Now this one had some Sharpie ink on the sides, and I am not speeding this up too much to show you guys that you see it starts to bleed, even though this is a stain blocker, and you want to make sure that you are using a good primer on this. So I don't really care that it smeared the blue paint, because it will on the second coat actually block it. I end up doing 3 coats of primer, and I did sand with 400 grit in between each coat. So here you go. The second coat, you can see that it starts to hide the blue. So just don't be alarmed. As long as you're using a good primer, you should be fine. This is Zinsser, Zinsser Cover Stain Primer, and even though it is an oil-based primer, it truly is a bonding primer, so I highly recommend it. It's here in Louisiana, it runs about $50 for the gallon, but I promise you it's worth every penny. Formica, wood, metal, it really and truly is a great primer. So again, I did 3 coats and sanded just with 400 grit in between, just to try to keep my top as smooth as possible, since I will be placing a stencil on it. And I'm just using a chip brush because this is an oil-based primer. So now I'm going to stencil. Now I did make this stencil on my cutting machine, and the best way to get no bleeding underneath is I used the same white primer and laid my first coat, a light coat, onto the stencil before I went over it with my black that I was using. Now I will tell you that experience has taught me that the Waverly black chalk paint is truly black, because I showing you here that you really want your first coat to be able to be really light so that you can still see through. But this black is so black that it truly only takes 2 coats, sometimes 3, to truly fill in everything. And that's why I like using it. So here you go. You can see this was actually only 2 coats, and I was using a very light coat on each one. Everyone always asks, do I lift when my paint is wet or when it's dry? I've done both. Here I am, it's still slightly wet, so I went ahead and pulled it just so I could show you that really and truly I've had success with both. If you have any doubt, because my surface was primed, I didn't worry about my paint peeling. But if you have any doubt about whether or not it's a good prime, it's probably best to pull when it's wet, because the longer the stencil sits on there, the more it will be stuck. And so I'm just going through and pulling out all the little insides of the letters. And I was actually quite happy. And this is how you get perfect stencils. So again, you go over it with the same base layer, and what that does is help seal all the edges, so that when you do come back with the black or whatever color you're going to actually paint the stencil, it won't bleed as much. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't bleed occasionally, but it's really rare. And also, this is why I sand in between my coats, because the smoother your surface is, the least likely you are to get bleed through underneath the stencil. I was quite pleased with how this turned out, and for a $3 table, it matches my other set of chairs that I got for free. Perfect. I went ahead and applied paste wax just to seal everything in. You know, sometimes I seal, sometimes I don't, but because this table will likely be used a lot, I went ahead and decided to seal it. So you just rub it on, and then I'm coming back into distressing. Once I just give it about 30 to 45 minutes to dry a little bit. I don't like a heavy distress, so I'm using a 180 grit and just rubbing the table here and there. And occasionally I will rub a little bit further in some spots. Now you do want to make sure your paint's dry, because if this black paint was not completely dry, you would be smearing black all over the table. So just make sure that whatever color you paint is completely dry. And here's the finished product. So here's the chairs that I received for free. And here's the after of the chairs, and I did the same technique. I just made a stencil, painted the white, and then sealed them. And then here's the table and chairs together, and I'm actually thrilled with how they came out. Okay, for our second project, I came across this cutting board, which had a lot of scratches, for $2 at a local thrift store. So at first I was going to just sand it down and then reapply a Danish oil finish over the top. But I decided to paint it with, this is Waverly Moss chalk paint. And I really like the coverage that you get with this. You know, I do make my own chalk paint a lot, but I decided I also support other people's, and so I just had a bunch of it laying around, so I just decided to paint a lot of things green this particular day. So it actually took 2 coats, and I simply sand it with at least a 300 grit sandpaper in between, and then this is how the final product came out. And then I sand one more time. And with chalk paint, you can see, if you see the little shadow areas and how they're lightening up, so you can see when you get it smooth. Because I'm gonna apply a stencil, I want my surface to be as smooth as possible. And first I'm gonna make a little farmhouse stripe. So I'm just gonna use some painter's tape, and I'm gonna first make my small stripe. And you just, I eyeball it. You can pencil it out if you want. But I just make sure the tape is real good on the edges. And then I'm just going to paint the stripe. I put 2 coats of, it's an off-white paint that I'm using. And it is also a chalk paint. So 2 coats of it. And then I'll move the tape line over and make a wider stripe just close to it. And again, I just eyeball it. And then I'll apply 2 coats of the white again to make the wider stripe. Some stripes have 2, some have 3. For this particular one, I just decided to go with 2. And I will pull the tape while it's wet, and then I'll let it dry really good. So now I'm just going to take and go ahead and sand lightly. You again want to make sure that your paint is completely dry. I made a number 7 stencil, used some black chalk paint, and attached some little lavender to the top, and then I used some jute rope to secure it all. And I really love how this turned out. What do you guys think? Leave me a comment if you think I should have painted it or should not have painted it. People always have an opinion about whether you should paint wood or not. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I don't know. I was just feeling this, so I decided to make it. It came out super cute, though. I really do enjoy how it came out. I did struggle to put the loop through the top. But overall, this project took me less than an hour to complete. I'd say it was about 35-40 minutes, so it was a real quick and easy. And here's the final product. Okay, for our third project, I showed this in one of my thrift haul videos. I got it. It was $8 at Goodwill, but it was half off. It was $4. And somehow I managed to lose the footage of me. What I did was ripped everything out, and then I simply dry brushed white on the top like I'm showing you here. I will flip it over to the back in a minute that is still bare and show you how I did it. But that's all I did. I just made sure that there wasn't a lot of paint on my paintbrush and just sort of built up the layers till I liked it and just lightly went over it. And it sort of gives it this distressed look and aged look. So here you go. I'm going to show you on the back how I actually did it. So again, my paintbrush doesn't have very much, and I'm just going over. And you can just keep going over it over and over again until you build up the layers that you actually like. And that's exactly how I did it. Once it was dry, I just used some styrofoam that we had bought a new television set and had a bunch of styrofoam from the packing of it. So I just used it to pack into the bottom of this basket, and then I use the same, it's like straw that came with it, and I'm just tucking it all around to make sure that it's covering the styrofoam when you look at it from the front. And once it's in there real good, I actually found some old lavender that I had from Walmart, and I want to say it was like $1.97 for a whole bunch. And what I do is I cut the bunches up because you get more for your money, because it won't, like, you can make it stretch, and I'm all about stretching it. I had some lamb's ear, which actually also looked good in there, but I ended up just using lavender. And then I'm just taking the wire from the bottom and sticking it through to the styrofoam, and that's what's going to hold it in place. And I'm just arranging it here and there. I like some pieces coming over the sides, some sticking up at the top. I'm basically trying to fill the space. And I didn't use but 2 sprigs of this, so it was $4 worth of lavender total, and I actually still had several pieces left, so not even a full $4. It's $1.97 for each sprig at Walmart. And like I said, I just take them apart, and you can cut them down to size if you need to. And here's our final product. Again, I've gotten so many comments on this. I think this might be one of my favorite flips that we've done. The entire project, but it's really simple. I found this flower clear glass jar for $4, and all I did was chalk paint it with 3 coats of white chalk paint and applied some longhorn flowers to the top. So for project number 5, I found this bowl. Yeah, these metal, they're like from the 90s even, to early 2000s. You can find a lot of this metal. And as long as this is a primer that I'm applying to it, it won't bleed through that way. Or you can spray clear spray paint before you actually start painting, and it helps so that if you don't prime this piece or spray with clear spray paint, it is going to bleed an orange rusty color through everything. And you're going to see here in a minute, I'll show you guys that in one spot I must have missed a little bit. It does, but I'm okay with it. But you definitely don't want the whole piece doing it. So I sprayed a clear coat over the top of it before I began painting. And I'm actually painting with the white Kills primer. But what I'm doing is I'm going to paint, let it sit for a minute, and then wipe it off. So here it is, all painted. And then I'm going to take a baby wipe and simply just start wiping off. And it is a little messy, but you see, it just looks, to me, I like that look better. It's just a more of a worn look that it has. And if you want more than you take off, then you can simply go back over it with a paintbrush and then come back. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just sort of rubbing off different areas. And here's what the final product is. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you like these, please subscribe. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Happy Anderson. See you guys next time.